Hello folks, welcome to another episode of Wu Says. This is of course where we get real about US, China, everywhere and everything in between. It's two superpowers, one global story. And in previous weeks, we have discussed about the Asian financial crisis. More specifically, in part one, we look at the bigger picture. And last week, in part two, we've actually zoomed in a lot closer to our home country, Malaysia. This week, in part three, we'll look at our neighbors, Indonesia, look at their time handling the Asian financial crisis. I am, of course, Hafiz Marzukhi, stepping in for Melissa Idris, and we have with me again Professor Dr. Thye, who during the height of the AFC, he had served as a special economic advisor to Treasury Secretary, then Treasury Secretary Robert Ruban, who had served under the Clinton administration. Prof. Wu, welcome again. So we've known about, the AFC has hit the region hard, but I'm zooming in. Let's zoom in a lot closer to Indonesia, where it's one of the countries with the worst collapse. And in 1998, if we were to look at the numbers, their GDP shrank by more than 13%, and this is far deeper than Korea, Thailand, or even Malaysia. So not only with the GDP hit, it has also had one of the slowest recovery if compared to all these countries that I've mentioned. Let's start with, let's unpack the fundamentals. Why was Indonesia's output collapse the deepest, and why was their recovery a lot slower compared to the neighbors?
Well, the most fundamental driver of economic growth is investment. And in this case, investment collapsed much more in Indonesia than anywhere else. And when that pulled income down, that in turn, as you spark off a vicious cycle where consumption drops as well. Mm-hmm. The question is, why did investment react so much more negatively than in Malaysia and Korea? The reason is because the economic crisis sparked off a much greater political crisis in Indonesia than in the other countries. Specifically, Indonesia had a political meltdown that was not present in the other countries. The reason why Indonesia had such a severe political meltdown is because there was not established protocol for legitimate succession. In other words, how does a leader get changed? Yes, Indonesia did have elections, but those elections were widely recognized to have been controlled and manipulated by President Suharto. President Suharto has been in power since 1966, and the way that Indonesia elected its president then, there was no direct election at that time. The people would participate in election that would elect what was the Indonesian parliament, and the Indonesian parliament in turn elected the president. And Suharto, having ran the country since 1966, stood for his 7th election in May 1997. Yeah. So he stood for election right before the Asian financial crisis. And his party won a stunning 75% of the seats and votes, which, of course, is very impressive win.
Yeah, but not the best time, right? Not the best time to get a majority vote.
But what it means also, given the fact that when you have been in power for so long, you have built up lots of resentment against different things that one has done, especially since it's a military dictatorship. That meant that they have undertaken, not taken the public opinion into mind as much as I otherwise would. So the 75% actually stretches credibility as well. And the fact that the heads of the political parties were picked by Suharto himself. So in what sense was that political competition? There was very little. Now, so he was elected, not highly popular despite the 75% vote. And then the economy got worse because when the Thai baht devalued in June, that started a stampede out of Southeast Asian currencies, including Indonesia currency. And when the stampede started, the rupiah went from 2,500 to 10,000 per US dollar. In other words, it depreciated 400%. Now, what that means is many of the banks were bankrupt because they had borrowed foreign money. And when the banks were having trouble, what the banks did was that they stopped lending. And when the banks stopped lending, the firms stopped producing. So beginning around 1998, economic conditions started worsening precipitously. And as things got worse, the level of unhappiness with Suharto grew. And in March 1998, Suharto was formally inaugurated. In fact, there was so much tensions in the country that the Americans sent Walter Mondale, who was former vice president of Jimmy Carter, to go see Suharto, to tell him that there is a potential social explosion in your country. And in your new term, you should adopt a program that would reduce social tension. And at the same time, Walter Mondale also delivered the message that we are not going to extend you a lot of loans to allow you to get out of the crisis. Basically, we are not going to bail you out. He was sent with this message to Suharto.
He's pretty much alone back then in 1998. So, I mean, Prof, we also knew Malaysia, I mean, you spoke about it last week as well. Malaysia had a similar contraction, about 10%. But, well, the rebound, I've heard, I've listened through the episode, and yes, it's the same thing. The banks are not doing well, so they have stopped lending, businesses are not blooming. So, what are the key differences, if you were to compare this country, Malaysia and Indonesia, that, perhaps help Malaysia's trajectory to recover faster as compared to Indonesia? Why was it too slow, other than what you've outlined earlier?
Okay. Then when student protests started appearing in response to the economic distress, the army shot 12 students of a leading university in Jakarta. And once, when blood has been spilled, the dynamics got very ugly. Such that in May, Chinatown in Jakarta was burnt to the ground. And there were riots in the street. And Suharto resigned. Now, here is the source of the instability. When Suharto was forced to resign, the vice president at that time took over. But the vice president was selected by Suharto in order to be unqualified to take over if he had to go. Basically, when a dictator chooses a deputy, he chooses someone that people would not think is qualified to take over from him.
I see.
So, in fact, when Mandela told Suharto that he should consider stepping down to have a successor, he pointed at his deputy and said, "You think he's qualified to take over?" The reason is, and here,
keeping the power center at him, you know.
Yeah, that's right. But the unfortunate thing is that person turned out to be very qualified and he did a very good job. The only thing was he has had a bad press before he was selected to be vice president. And you could almost say when he was unjustifiably had a bad press, he became a good candidate as far as Suharto was concerned. Now, let me tell you about this particular person. His name is Habibie. Mr. Habibie is an outstanding aeronautical engineer. When he used to work for the German airplane company, the Messerschmitt, and he did some pioneering work. For example, he's the person who developed the mathematical equation that describes how metal fatigue cracks over time. In other words, it is known as the Habibie crack theory.
Wow.
How an airplane, when it ages, metal fatigue sets in and it ages over time. Because of his great, clear technical excellence, and Suharto, seeing the Proton saga in Malaysia, wants to do something bigger than what Malaysia is doing. So Suharto said, Malaysia can build motor cars, but we are starting to build airplanes.
Okay.
So, we are going to head for the sky, unlike Malaysia, who are going to remain earthbound.
Yeah.
So he brought Habibie back, and Habibie started his airplane building project for Indonesia. And of course, that automatically got him a lot of
scrutiny.
You could say the equivalence of hate mail, because there were lots of people who were pushing projects on the president. There were lots of economic advisors, and all of a sudden, someone parachuted in with the year of the president. So, and he said he wanted to build airplanes, and that got a lot of ridicule. In fact, the orthodox economists in particular called his plan to build airplanes as the Habibie crackpot theory.
Oh no.
Which is a takeoff from what he was famous for, the Habibie crack theory. So he had a bad reputation and not seen as particularly qualified because he was not a national political leader before he took over. So business confidence fell further. So once the riots began, and when Suharto stepped down, Habibie stepped in, but everyone did not see Habibie as a truly legitimate leader. And because they did not see him, they expect further changes. In other words, the political drama has not ended. And when people think that the political drama has not ended, investors postpone their investment decisions naturally. And when they postpone their investment decisions, the economy continues to plunge downwards. So you could say the difference why the Indonesian case was so much economic collapse got so much worse, and why the recovery was so much slower is because there was an absence of a legitimate mechanism for political succession.
I see.
So what then happened? It turns out Habibie turns out to have been a very good president, actually.
Yeah.
History has remembered him well, in other words. So, Prof, looking back at this particular episode within Indonesia's history, what can they learn? I mean, what have they picked out from this whole episode, AFC episode, that have stayed on today? Did it change how they approach growth or economic, how they handle the economy post, from between perhaps early 2000 all the way until now?
Well, now, if you look at the political history of Indonesia, it is a country with quite a number of serious separatist movements. For example, part of Sumatra wanted to leave at one time, part of Sulawesi wanted to leave at one time. And so this is a country where there is clear indigenous racial
Tensions.
The Bugis did not see themselves as Javanese, and so forth. So the big fear during the Asian financial crisis was whether the country would break apart, because Suharto had justified his strongman rule with that my army is able to keep in forces the separatist tendencies in the country. That's why I have to play tough and hard. That was the justification of why you have strong military presence in every level of the government. And what Habibie did was that he decentralized the country politically. And he decentralized the country economically as well. Basically, province governors are now freely elected, and the provincial parties are allowed to operate without stringent registration requirements from Jakarta. So he gave a lot of autonomy to the provinces. And that turned out to have been enough to keep Indonesia together as a country. But of course, it also shows that by 1998, Indonesians have by then embraced the idea of one country despite the great ethnic diversity of the country, because each island has its own language, and some of them are Christians, some of them are less and different strains of Islam in the country.
So, Prof.
So the biggest achievement is the country stay together, thanks to Habibie.
Yeah, that's great. And in fact, I believe what you've described is pretty much Indonesia's iteration. It is today, as we see Indonesia today. And I mean, hindsight is always 2020. And of course, what are the main lessons that we could draw from this whole Asian financial crisis from Malaysia, Indonesia, and perhaps you could even weave in some lessons that you find interesting from other neighboring countries as well. What could we draw from this episode that could prepare these countries for any future financial shocks or technological or even geopolitical? As we know, right now we're in the age of dealing with a very divisive United States. So what lessons could be drawn from this whole episode of the Asian financial crisis?
Well, before I go on to the very general principles, I would like to bring your attention to one question that is often asked. I'm often asked, would Indonesia have done better if they had put on capital controls?
I see.
In other words, to stop money from leaving from Indonesia.
Okay.
That is what I'm often asked.
Yeah. I mean, basically, comparing it to what Malaysia has done, Yeah.
Yes, of course. And
Yes.
the truth is, Indonesia is a country of 7,000 islands. And you know that nobody has the accurate figures of how much Indonesia export.
Mm.
The reason is because the government collects taxes on transactions. And if you want to escape the taxes, you put your goods in a boat and send it off to Singapore. And Singapore doesn't report
Yeah.
goods coming from Indonesia. Just look at the statistic. Singapore reports how much goods import from Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, but the only country it doesn't report is Indonesia. Because so much. Now, what does that mean? That means that it's impossible to prevent money running out from Indonesia.
Okay.
So that the capital flight that Malaysia was able to stop with capital control, it would not have worked in Indonesia. Indonesia is just too close to the international financial center, Singapore. People could pile all their rupiahs in a boat and head right off to Singapore. So that is what it means is what works in one country
May not work.
work in another country, largely because of, in this case, the geographical nature of Indonesia has made it a truly open economy. The government cannot control smuggling. The government cannot control capital flights. Whereas in Malaysia, we are able to do so. So the first lesson is the right policy to do depends on the circumstances of the country.
Basically, you can't copy, you can't copy what your neighbors are doing, even if the problems are solved.
Yes. So what? Yeah, that is the first lesson. The second lesson to draw is that we must recognize that financial markets sometimes misbehave badly. And financial markets misbehave, the governments have to be able to step in to address it. In this case, suppose money is running out. Malaysia stopped it with capital controls. Another way to address this is that the government has enough reserves to meet the outflow, the way that Hong Kong did. So how do you have enough reserves? That's why a regional bank is exceeding a regional financial fund, like Asia Monetary Fund, would have been very important, because we can afford to pool the reserves of all the ASEAN countries together. And now the Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans have joined in. We have enough reserves to be able to defend the currencies of ASEAN. So the second important thing is it has enhanced regional cooperation in ASEAN, because we recognize that the economic disease could spread from country A to country B, which we recognize again during COVID-19.
Yeah, clearly. And that is a bit more literal, right? Literal.
Yeah, exactly. And the third thing is the political institutions really matter. If an economic crisis were to precipitate a political crisis, then the consequences of that economic crisis will be much more severe than a country that did not experience a similar political meltdown. In a previous episode, I had talked about, if you look at the profile of GDP growth rate, what happens is when the financial panic happens, output collapse. So, a sharp collapse, the moment the the panic is over, there's a quick recovery, so there's a big V shape. In the case of Indonesia, it was a long, drawn-out U shape. And the U shape is not because people have to move from one industry to another, unlike structural adjustment. The U shape is because of the political fight that was happening in the country. And political instability naturally produces low economic growth. Perhaps one way to look at it is compare the economic growth in Malaysia with the time that when we had 3 prime ministers in 3 years, or 5 prime ministers in 5 years. Count it. Look at that period of economic growth with the period before and the period after, and you do see a difference. So having a political system that the citizens all are willing to play by the rules of certainly is good for economic development.
Yeah, because investors will be confident and basically political instability is no. Thank you so much, Professor Wu, for sharing the lessons. And of course, the conversation continues every week here on Wu Says, because we will be continuously looking at the most pressing issues gripping our world. As always, thank you so much, Professor, for your time. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Till next time, we'll see you again.